in a world where Kim Mulkey's gone, say Scott Drew leaves Baylor, Dave Aranda just went 3-9, brought in the 60th best recruiting class, 9th best transfer class in the Big 12. Feels like everything, Baylor was irrelevant in athletics 20 years ago, and then around the he who should not be named era, became one of the coolest, brightest schools in the country.
Yeah.
If Scott Drew departs, do you, especially as bad as baseball is, do you enter an era of, we're not great at anything except for acrobatics and tumbling?
Yes. And I said it on Locked On Baylor yesterday. Until millions of people come out to watch acrobatics and tumbling on TV, then yes, that's what you'll be. I don't think it's unfair to say that if Scott Drew leaves, you're a dumpster fire in the short term. Now you will have good options for your next head basketball coach because of that Scott Drew coaching tree. I think, Jerome Tang gets the call. Grant McCaslin, that might be a little tougher to get him away from Tech, although the Tech fans are really sweating it out. And even a John Jacobs is still on the table, a guy who just took the head coaching job at FAU. So you've got some options there, but you just don't know. You're in the wilderness if Scott Drew leaves. I mean, Scott Drew right now at this moment is the face of Baylor athletics. That Baylor men's basketball program has been keeping us alive the last couple of years. Yeah. I think women's basketball is in a fine spot, but it's not the powerhouse it was. I think Nikki Collins building something good with the women's basketball team. But to your original point, then yes, we're right back to 2004. 2003, where the only thing you've got is a women's basketball program on the rise. You don't have the murder scandal, hopefully, but yes, you're right back to that, a men's tennis and women's basketball school. But I mean, you just look at the bare bones of it. Football down, baseball down, women's basketball okay. Men's basketball becomes a humongous question mark.
I want to cover your bases there, but you say women's basketball, okay, in the context of where it has been. Good, great in the context of the rest of the country, but not at an elite level where it was at least. So then, I mean, who do you point the finger at? I mean, when I was in Waco, heard plenty of things about current administration and things that just are like, there are coaches that feel as though they're being left behind. There are players and personnel that feel as though the current atmosphere in the athletic department is not constructive. Is there one person to pin this on? Because, buddy, things have not been going well for the last 2 years ish, and are really not going well today.
I don't know that there's any one person that you can pin it on. But if Scott Drew leaves, you look at athletic director Mack Rhoades and say, how does this happen? I know there was some parts of the fan base that were okay to see Kim Mulkey leave. Another portion was adamantly not okay to see Kim Mulkey leave. Yeah. And the whole fan base would say, what are we doing? How can we not keep Scott Drew? Even though it's Kentucky making the call. I know that's a tough draw, and I like Mack, and I really like what he's done for the athletic department. But if Scott Drew leaves, you look at two Hall of Famers out the door and staking his job to a 3-9 coach. That's just the bare bones of it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And so I don't know that you can blame it totally on one person with all the context, but of course it would fall on Mack Rhoades' lap. And one other thing that I hate using this excuse all the time nowadays, but I think it does fit with what would happen if Scott Drew were to leave. It is that Baylor does still need to remember its place in all this, and that there are schools out there with a lot more money and a lot more resources to do this. Yeah. I don't want to play totally poor, but what we've experienced the last decade at Baylor is the golden era of Baylor athletics. Right. And when small schools have that, their coaches get poached. And this would have happened in a 3 very different ways in a long period of time. One football coach gets fired due to scandal, but then you look at that, Matt Rule has success right after. He gets an NFL job and now gets a major college coaching job at Nebraska. Kim Mulkey builds this thing into a dynasty. She gets a quote unquote bigger job, although LSU is not the same program, gets a lot of money to go and coach there, more than almost any women's college coach. And then you would fall into Scott Drew, where it's like, oh, but he left for Kentucky. You can't blame Baylor for that. But it's the end of a long cycle here where you finally get a golden era and where you thought you were holding on to these people for life, you didn't. I mean, because if I had told you 10 years ago, 2014, okay, look at what you've got. Art Briles in football, Kim Mulkey women's basketball, Scott Drew, even before the national championship in basketball, you would say none of those guys are ever leaving. Right. These people are retiring at Baylor. And now we are unfortunately very close to seeing the third of those three leave, with another up and coming coach in a major sport like Matt Rule gone in between. So yeah, it would be a disaster. I don't know that you can blame any one person, but it would bring us to a point where we'd have to reevaluate how the administration is handling athletics and athletics money and how Baylor wants to use it going forward. Because the other thing too, Drake, and I know you know a lot about this, is Baylor has used athletics majorly the last 10, 15 years as a way to grow the school, to grow the brand of Baylor. We've seen a couple of rebrands in that time since RG3 won the Heisman. I'll go back to that. And it was a huge engine for me as a kid from Massachusetts to learn about Baylor. I'm sure it was for you, one state over in Arkansas. Like, that is Baylor's way of getting their message out to the world. 100%. And if you're going to go back into this wilderness that you were in the early aughts in terms of athletics, you're at the bottom of the pile, and you're not having this 50-50 split of Texas students versus out-of-state students. You're not having the national platform that you had. I don't want to be Wake Forest. If I'm Baylor, I don't want to be Wake Forest. I don't want to go into that, and look, it probably feels like a pessimistic view, and it'd be easy as if you're a Baylor fan to look at, be like, oh, this is just pessimism. No. I want you to go back to 2015, 2014, what it was like to be a Baylor fan. Now, look, Ian McCaw, Art Briles, the way that Baylor got there, I'm not lauding that, but I want you to go back to what it felt like to wake up on August 27th, on that Wednesday, and think, everything's good. Everything's good at this school. To see it now a decade later just be far from that and could get even further from that is something I think we should all look at and say, where did it go wrong entirely? Because it came back there with Mac Rhodes very early on, and now it feels like it might be gone again. Pessimism, maybe you can say that. I just miss that era of Baylor athletics, not the way it got there, but where Baylor was at its peak in the golden era. So you want to close out on that? Yeah, I mean, I can put myself in that position pretty easily, Drake, because that's when I was looking at going to Baylor. That's when I was a senior in high school and starting at Baylor. When I started there in the fall of 2015, I don't think it's unfair to say it was maybe the hottest school in the country. Yep. Like, in terms of, obviously the football success and the new stadium and the building more on the campus and Selena Gomez goes out in public with a Baylor shirt on, and I think she named her dog Baylor, Yes, there's a lot to it. It was very, very cool and very hot, and it was a sleeping giant that was just starting to wake up. And maybe we did see the wake up of it in 2021 with the national championship in men's basketball and the Sugar Bowl in football, but it would feel like a really stark decline from the time that I started at Baylor to now, if Scott Drew does leave and you're searching for answers in the athletic department. That's Cameron Stewart, Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12, America's #1 Big 12 podcast. Thanks for joining us. Tough times in Waco. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. No se grande.